guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today we're talking about 90s music, because of course we were teenagers in the 90s. We both love 90s music. Mm-hmm. But was 90s music really all that influential? There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check those out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist we put together a week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you see all thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. So like I said, we were both teenagers in the 90s, and my kids harass me all the time about how much 90s music I have in my record collection. So I think you're kind of the same way.
Yeah,
a lot of our music is from the 90s, or at least 90s artists.
Right.
But I guess I was thinking about it a couple days ago. You know, when we talk about 70s music and 80s music, even 60s music, we always talk about how influential it was on so many other artists that came after them. But when it came to 90s music, I don't think it was really all that influential outside of the 90s. Obviously, you know, you had bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, those like the Soundgarden, those earlier bands.
And they kind of brought bands up with them, like other bands that came out like 5-6 years later, still within the 90s, may have been influenced by them.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I kind of agree. I don't know if there was much influence. Maybe with like the pop punk stuff, Green Day was hugely influential in that. Yeah, there really wasn't pop punk before that.
But that only lasted for a very short period of time in the early part of the 2000s before it turned into like emo and went a bunch of different other ways.
I suppose.
Because really, I think like as far as like the pop punk stuff goes, like I said, like 2005, 2006, it was largely kind of over at that point.
Really?
And kind of went on to do other things. Mm. So really, yeah, Blink-182 really got popular in 99. So I guess I can see how that was influential in the early part of the 2000s. But
it still has an expiration date, whereas music of the 60s and 70s specifically it's still
influential today.
Right. I mean, it's influencing the Greta Van Fleets and the Rival Sons and
those kind of bands.
Those kind of bands.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's hard to say no, but it's also hard to find an example of a group of artists that are new today that you can draw a straight line back to, say, 90s music. It's kind of hard to do that.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that it's not influential at all. There's definitely influence there. 90s music did influence stuff in the 2000s, but I think in comparison to, say, music of the 70s with Led Zeppelin and, you know, Kiss, Aerosmith, and, you know, all these other big bands in the 70s that influenced music, obviously influenced music in the 80s, influenced music in the 90s, and still in some aspects still influence music today.
Could you say, though, that any influence of music from the 90s is really just an extension of their influence from the 70s?
Yeah, possibly.
You know, so like how you could argue that 70s punk may have influenced the early grunge, and then of course pop punk. Anything that kind of come after that is still, you can still draw a direct line back to the 70s rather than so much to the 90s, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
And even with the grunge thing, I mean, that was kind of elements of rock and a little bit of punk element to it. There's
a lot of people that consider Nevermind a punk album.
Yeah,
because of you know,
because grunge.
Green
Grunge is really
Green Day,
just a Seattle version of punk.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. Nirvana was heavily influenced by, you know, 70s and 80s punk music, so that's why they're kind of an extension of that. But
I'm wondering, like I said, maybe any influence that we would even be able to find as a direct line to the 90s would more or less be a direct line back to the 70s anyway. Yeah. You know, or even early 80s for that matter.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I can't think of anybody around today that I could say, oh yeah, that's definitely a Pearl Jam influence there.
Yeah. And really, if you look at the 90s, I think the way I kind of look at the 90s is like two different entities. The early part of the 90s with grunge and this like early explosion of alternative and punk. And then the later 90s was kind of like this different kind of form of rock. Even different than the earlier alternative rock. I mean, it's still alternative, but it was kind of going in a more radio-friendly kind of way.
Yeah, a little bit more commercialized.
Yeah, and I think the more commercialized rock in the 90s, like in the later part of the 90s, say like 96 to 99 or 95 to 99, I think that part of the 90s was more influential in 2000s music than the earlier part of the 90s.
Which would make sense because, there's bands that are influenced by style. But generally speaking, a lot of artists are being influenced by success.
Yeah.
They want what that band had, not necessarily, and they'll do what that band did to get it, but it's on a shallow level. It's not an artistic reason. It's more of a commercial reason.
Yeah.
So that could be why that's the case.
Yeah.
Those, even though that early 90s stuff was hugely successful, the more commercialized version of that stuff in the later 90s and early 2000s was way more lucrative.
Yeah. The bastardized version.
Yeah, as well with all styles, all art forms. If something works, there will be 100 people who will do that 1,000 times over just to make the money that original thing made.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe that's why there's not this long-lasting influence from the 90s. Because of, like you said, I think the real hardcore artistic version of 90s music was in the beginning part
and
of the
very
decade.
Kind of a brief, almost lightning in a bottle situation.
Like a flash in the pan kind of thing. And then what came after that is what has been the long-lasting influence, I guess, maybe.
Which is sad.
And maybe we'll get to a point where rock is being influenced again by music from the 90s, but I don't think we're at that point yet, and really haven't been for really, it's 2023 now, so really the last, I'd say at least 10 to 15 years, we've kind of lost that influence there. And like I said, we might get that around again. We've got bands like Greta Van Fleet, Rival Sons that are being influenced by 70s music. So I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility.
And there's a small group of bands that are kind of they're doing this melodic rock, which is more of an 80s thing. So there's some 80s influence, which really wasn't there before. Yeah. So if that can come around again, maybe that early 90s stuff has a chance of the artistic side of it. That's really what I want to see.
And I guess I should kind of throw in there that I know there are bands out there performing today that are influenced by 90s music. They are not the major players in rock music.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. I'd love to know what you guys think of this, because I know there's people out there that don't feel the same way, that think that 90s music was really influential and still influencing music today. I just don't really see it.
And if there's bands that you know of that you think have that direct straight line back to, say, a early Nirvana or early Soundgarden or something like that, let us know. Put it in the comments, because I'm always looking for new bands anyway.
Yeah, like I said, I know that there's bands out there. They just aren't in the mainstream. And rock isn't in the mainstream anyway, but in the mainstream of rock.
Right.
But I don't know. Let us know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.